I have a habit lately of doing these sort of nested videos, which is talking about different topics that are sort of, you know, like one is springboarding the other. Anyway, so there's another video out there about the concept of flow, and if you are confused by what I'm going to talk about, you can look that up or just look up the concept yourself. Anyway, I want to talk about the difference between being in a state of flow and being distracted and maladaptive behaviors. Because they kind of are like the same, possibly the same thing. You could be doing the exact same thing for all three of those, but it sort of depends on the degree of it and how it's affecting you. So flow basically is, I think, one of the things that all human beings want to have in their life, which is something that gives them a sense of achievement, and it doesn't have like a greater, you know, it's just, it's like part of being human that you're able to be fascinated and curious, and put some effort into that curiosity. That's what flow is. And so if you're looking for and achieving a sense of flow, it's awesome and great. And I don't think that it's possible to actually become sort of addicted to it. I think that you can sort of waste a lot of time learning something in order to achieve flow and practicing, but I mean, you might, because the point that the hallmark of flow is that you're doing something and you don't realize how much time has gone by, that you're just so into it that you don't notice. I think that's okay. I mean, the thing about flow is that it's not maladaptive. It's like the opposite of maladaptive, which means that even though you might miss a meal because you're so into whatever, you'll come out of it on your own. You won't need somebody else to take you out of it, and you'll realize, oh, I need to do some self-care. And it's basically, doesn't matter what you're doing. It's if it's flow state, it's like it won't let you be destructive. Now, the next thing that it's is the idea of doing something as a distraction, because it could be the same thing. Like you could read a book to achieve flow. That, you know, you get this really awesome book and you just stay up all night reading it. It's great because it's got such a great story and you love the characters. That's flow. But you could read maybe even the same book that, you know, that other person got flow from it, but for you, you're reading it as a distraction because you're, you know, upset about some aspect of having avoidant personality disorder. And rather than cope with it or deal with it, you read a book to distract yourself from it. Now that can become addictive, especially if you're using internet. You can, you know, go on YouTube and watch video after video after video, and, you know, do that for weeks on end as a distraction because it's too painful to deal with whatever emotion that you've got. Well, and that actually brings us to the last thing, which is, because you can distract something. Using distraction, I think, can be an incredibly positive thing, especially if you're overwhelmed and you're like peaking, or something's brand new and you don't know how to deal with it. And so rather than let it swamp you and practically kill you, I mean, it could actually kill you if it really got that bad, these emotions, rather than let it just overwhelm your entire self, you can use a distraction basically to give yourself a timeout so that you can cope with it later. Like maybe you just got some news right now and you can't handle it, and you're too tired, and so I'm going to go get that book and I'm going to read it until I'm sleepy so that I can get some rest, wake up tomorrow, and be better able to cope. That is good distraction. If you're doing something for weeks and weeks on end compulsively, that's when it becomes maladaptive. And the hallmark of maladaptive behavior is that you're doing something that so exclusively it becomes destructive. Now, maladaptive behavior for people with avoidant personality disorder, I mean, that's hallmark of the behavior. That's like, you know, because there are people that are shy. They might be really, really shy, and they do not have avoidant personality disorder. They're still able, I mean, they're shy, but they can get over it. You know, once they get to know somebody, they can get over it. If you have avoidant personality disorder, you can't get over it ever. The behaviors that you do to avoid the triggering situations take over your life. I mean, this is why it's a personality disorder. It's because you can't actually live your life in a fully functioning manner. It has to disrupt, you know, what you need and want to do with your life on a permanent basis in order to be a personality disorder. So that's definitely maladaptive. But again, if you're doing something that for somebody else might have a sense of flow, or for somebody else on a short-term basis might be a distraction. You know, for instance, I am incapable of sitting in a waiting room for any person at any point. I mean, I get so crazy nervous, I just can't stand it. So I always bring some sort of distraction, a book to read or something like that. Again, it's short term. How long are you going to be sitting in a waiting room? You know, I mean, I think the longest I was ever in a waiting room was like probably an ER or something. It was like 4 hours max. Okay. And again, it wasn't like I was so cat fur. Anyway, it wasn't like I was so obsessed with whatever I was doing. It's like I was still doing, you know, really basic human self-care, like making sure that I had things to drink and etc. So if it's maladaptive, it's totally obsessive, and it does get in the way of living your life. So those are the three things. I mean, the thing is that it's almost like a circle, especially on the outside, because if you're doing flow, then what's going on? Oh, cat, be nice. Anyway, what's going on is you're basically getting completely in the zone, and at that point, from somebody on the outside looking in, they might just think, you know, that you're just not there and you're not taking care of yourself. But if you're, the thing is though, you are actually doing something to better yourself if you're in a state of flow. And when you get out of the state of flow, then you feel like you've achieved something. You know, other people, maybe they wouldn't be something they're into, so they're like, what the heck are you doing? But that doesn't really matter. And if it's something that you can feel a sense of achievement, then it's flow. If it's maladaptive, when you come out the other side, you just feel like, oh, what have I done? I've just wasted all this time, and there's nothing positive that you can really get from it. You know, you just feel like awful about yourself. That's maladaptive. So those are the three things, and I would watch out, because the one can turn into the other and can turn into the third if you're not paying attention. Again, flow doesn't happen that often. So if you're thinking that you're achieving a state of flow every single night, probably not unless you're like some sort of artistic genius. You know, so things like, it's possible that you might feel maybe you're getting a sense of flow, like doing a Netflix binge, but probably not, because probably when you get to the end, you're just exhausted and you're like, I can't believe I just watched 6 hours in a row of that show. So, you know, flow doesn't happen very often. And if you are like sort of getting dependent on something, you're thinking you're achieving flow all the time, I would put limits on yourself as far as how much time you can spend doing that. Because again, it's just impossible. It's impossible to have a sense of flow for that long. It will turn maladaptive because it's sort of like a circle. It ends up on itself. So don't let it become maladaptive. But again, pay attention to how much time you're spending. If you're spending an extraordinary amount of time, then it's not a distraction. It becomes maladaptive. And pay attention to how you feel afterward. If you feel like you could take on the world, even though you just spent 6 hours doing something, that's flow. If you feel like, oh, what a schmuck, I can't believe I just did that, that's maladaptive. Avoid maladaptive and look forward to achieving flow, you know, a few times a year or more. Be pretty awesome. And pay attention to the distraction, that you use it sparingly, specifically, and you're aware of what you're doing. You're doing it, I hate the term, but you're doing it in a mindful way is how they describe it. You're paying attention, basically. You're not doing it all the time, because then it becomes maladaptive. And also, it becomes less effective. So if you do distraction in short little bursts when you're really needing it, then it can be really effective. But if you do it all the time, it just doesn't work anymore. And it's a useful tool. So make sure you basically keep it sharp. Because if it becomes dull, then and you really need it, you're up the creek. But that's the distinction between those three concepts as I see them.